In today's video, you're going to learn everything you need to know about void in TypeScript. You're going to learn where you might want to use this and also where it wouldn't really make sense to use this. So first off, what is void? Well, void represents the absence of not having a type at all. And you will commonly see this where a function doesn't return any value whatsoever. So in a function, if it doesn't return a value, well then, since there is no return value, then there's also no type. So there's an absence of a type. So in this instance, void makes sense because it is the absence of a type, because there is an absence of a value. So here on line 10, you can see I have a function called returns nothing. And when I hover over this function, you see that the annotation that TypeScript gives me here is :void, telling me that this is a function called returns nothing and it returns void. And that is because the function, it quite frankly returns nothing. There is an absence of a type here within this function. And if you do have a function like this that returns nothing, I think that for the sake of code clarity and just being a little bit more explicit about your code, in these instances, it might be a good idea to add this void annotation as the return value of this function. So behind the parentheses here, adding :void is saying that this is a function that returns void. And I think that one benefit of that is making your code more clear. Like, you explicitly want this function to return nothing. This didn't happen by accident. As in your programs, most of your functions are you're probably going to want to return something. So when you don't do that, you might not want another developer to wonder, okay, did they mean to write this function to just return nothing? And if they see this :void, well, that's explicitly saying, okay, well, if they authored this to be :void here and gave it the annotation of void, then they likely do want this to just return nothing. So I think it can make your code a little bit more explicit in that standpoint, which can be good for readability and clarity. Now, it probably doesn't make sense to use void when you're declaring a variable and you're just declaring it to a non-value, so null or undefined. As if you declare something to have a void type, so here on line 27, I'm saying some var is of type void. Well, the only two values that I can assign to a void type are null and undefined, because that's how you represent an absence of a value. And since void represents the absence of a type, it makes sense in those situations. So here I can assign it to null, and then I can assign it to undefined without any errors. But anytime I try to assign this to a number like I do here, I'm going to get number is not assignable to type void. Or if I had a string here, the string 12, I'm going to get the same thing here. And the reason why I wouldn't probably use void in this situation is because you could just say that this value is going to be of type null, or it's going to be of type undefined. And I think that would probably make a little bit more sense rather than saying it's type void and then assigning it to either null or undefined. All right, so void in TypeScript represents the absence of not having a value at all. You often see it in functions that have no return value whatsoever. And if you create a function that has no return value, I might explicitly put the return value of this function is void just to make your code a little bit more clear. And then I probably wouldn't declare a variable with the annotation of void and say that it is of type void, because I think you can just use null or undefined for that case, since void types are only assignable to null and undefined. So hopefully this video gives you a good idea of how void works, and I will see you in that next one.